Hi guys, I'm going to try to work on Ancient Mali a little bit again today. So if you remember, the book we're reading is from the point of view of a child whose father and grandfather are high up in the government of Mali at the time. The grandfather is the well-respected griot for the family, and the father is part of the government. Your father traveled a lot and you didn't see him often. You were used to this. Children were usually the responsibility of their mother until they turned 12. Remember, we talked about what the females' jobs were. They were to take care of the children, do the grocery shopping, the cooking, and then also help work on the farms. Boys went to school in mosques where they were taught to recite the Quran. They would also learn a craft or trade by the time they were 12. If you know anything about the Quran, that's the essentially the Bible of their faith. Girls stayed home with their mothers where they learned how to be good wives and mothers themselves. You were fed, cosseted, and kept safe. You felt pampered and loved by your parents. However, you knew the time was coming soon for you to marry. And in ancient times, you got married very young, very, very young, because you didn't live very long back then. 30 was considered old. When your second oldest brother turned 12, he had a ceremony to make him a man. You were glad when this finally happened. He was prone to acting like a baby and pulling your hair. He moved up to the next town and was apprenticed by your uncle, who was an artisan. Your brother had to learn a profession to earn money. Your uncle made ceremonial statues for people to worship. He carved statues from wood and exaggerated features famous in Mali art. He was an excellent artist, and you marveled at his talent. Your brother was lucky he had a good teacher. He came home with many finely carved statues. You were surprised at how talented he was. All you thought he was capable of doing was annoying you. "12 to 13 was a turning point for you too. You would be considered ready to have children and marry. A young man would take 3 kola nuts to your father when he decided to ask you to marry him. They would argue about the amount of nuts for your hand in marriage, eventually settling on 10. He would bring an entire basket of them on your wedding day. A kola nut is a bitter fruit with pale flesh inside. Everyone loves the feeling they get when they eat these nuts. It makes them wide awake and full of energy. So they would have been sort of like coffee beans, I guess, with caffeine. So they would make you feel energized. Family members would send gifts of cloth to your mother for you to build your wardrobe. Men would give money to the bridegroom your parents had chosen for you. You knew your bridegroom's family would have to pay for the wedding. You had time to worry about the thought of a husband. You were just 10 this last year." So she only has 2 more years. You liked to dress up with all the beautiful printed clothes your mother had in her room. Mali was known for its unique tie-dye and mud cloths. Traditional designs were painted or pounded by stamps on sheets of rough cloth, using different types of soil for color. Only females worked on the cloth to make these designs. All the women wore a wraparound skirt called a panier with a matching tunic and headdresses. If you can see that. Your mother came from a town where the women wore 8 small rings on the rim of their ear to signify her 8 ancestors. She wore grigris to make the evil spirits go away. A grigri was a lucky charm to ward off evil spirits. You wore a charm under your tunic with your grandmother had made for you. The grigri was on a leather string and tied around your neck. All your father's wives wore an assortment of amulets, bracelets, and rings. Remember, we talked about how the men had many wives so that they had lots of children to help around the farms and with everything that needed to be done. After all, how else would you show how wealthy you were? You loved mixing the traditions of your African ancestors with your new Muslim faith. You enjoyed the vibrant and loud colors of the clothes. Women could choose whether or not they wanted to cover their hair in the Muslim tradition. The king declared people could live the way they wanted and worship as they chose. Let's see. read one more page and then we'll read the rest later this week. You like to dress up with all the beautiful, oh, I just read that. So we do just have a few more pages left. Men mostly wore bubu, a full-length tunic. Mansa Musa favored baggy pants. In fact, it was a high honor of a man if he wore baggy pants. The bigger, the greater the honor. Your father had a pair of pants so big he could hide all his children behind them. This proved he was a great man. One of your uncles wore a hunter's tunic. It was a tunic decorated with animal claws, shells, teeth, and fur. It had many secret pockets with amulets to ward off evil spirits as well as dangerous animals. He wore it to the many festivals and celebrations to remind people of how powerful your family was. There was one tradition that you weren't allowed to participate in. When someone in the family died, only men could accompany the body to the cemetery if the person was a Muslim. This made you angry when your great-grandmother passed away. You had to stay home when they buried her. So some of the traditions were not so great for the women. That's where I'm going to stop today. And that only leaves us a couple of pages to read the next time. And I hope you're enjoying this recap of Ancient Mali and that you're doing well with your worksheets at home. If you have any questions, please let me know.